Hey, everybody, before we jump into this episode, I got a couple of quick announcements. First, the American Association of Municipal Executives is hosting its third City Manager Q&A session for those aspiring executives who are members of the organization. So make sure you RSVP inside the AAME community today. If you are not a member of the AAME and you're aspiring to become a city manager, you should join the organization as soon as possible so that you can start participating in these live Q&As with other city managers, learning from them, building your professional network, so forth and so on. Second, from October 7th through the 15th, I'm going to be storming the South. I'm going to be touring Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. I got stops in Front Royale and I just said Front Royale like it's Pulp Fiction, guys. I got stops in Front Royal, Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia. Going to do lunch and dinner there, respectively. Going down to Augusta. Going to do lunch and dinner down there on the 8th. Going to be in Beaufort on the 9th and the 10th. Heading out to Charlotte on the 11th, where we're going to be doing Saturday football games and lunch from noon to 4. Going to be going to church on Sunday with Daniel Roseman in Charlotte. So you guys are welcome to join us if you are in those neck of the woods. And then we're going to be doing a hike up in the Blowing Rock, North Carolina area on Monday, Columbus Day. And then the rest of the agenda is wide open. I'm hoping to be up in the Richmond, Virginia area around the 15th. So if you want to join us in one of those lunches or dinners that are being generously sponsored by Clear Career Professionals and City Detect, they're taking care of us. Please make sure you reach out and get in touch. Or if you can't make it to one of those events and you want me to stop in for a one-on-one at City Hall, please let me know. I'd love to see you, love to meet you, put some faces to some names, and build that connection. All right, now on to my interview with Troy Body. He is the city manager for Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He is the Black City Manager, and we're looking to do a series of interviews in the future, maybe even launch his own podcast. So give it a listen. Tell us what you think. Provide us with some constructive feedback and criticism. Thank you. All right, all right, all right. I'm Joe Turner, and this is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. It is the most influential local government podcast in America, and I'm really excited about the guest that I have on the show today. His name is Troy Body. He has been on the show before a few months back when I interviewed him. He is the city manager for Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which I think is one of the more challenging positions in the country. And Troy, before we get into why I wanted to have you on the podcast, why don't you briefly introduce yourself to the audience so they can learn a little bit more about you? Because you have a fascinating background and some interesting life experience to go with it.
Thank you for having me on the show, Joe. I've been in Hopkinsville now about 7.5 years, serving as the city administrator and chief of staff. I'm on my third mayor in 7.5 years. We're in Western Kentucky, north of Nashville and near the Fort Campbell military installation. It's an interesting city in terms of diversity and demographics, largest farming county in the state of Kentucky and one of the largest in the country. Also, we have several industrial parks making car parts and various other things, and we've been quite successful lately diversifying our economy here. My background has been working for several governors in state government. I think I'm on my fourth mayor in various cities, but I've also done a lot of work working overseas, living in Asia. Prior to coming back to the United States, I was working for the International Republican Institute and Democracy International around Africa. And I was there when the Sudan became South Sudan, and Sudan broke, the largest country in Africa, broke into two. Worked in Kenya, worked down in South Africa, Zimbabwe. And lastly, before coming back, I was in Nigeria, then I got sent back to South Sudan. War broke out. I came back to Kentucky, and after that last war, we had to get out of the country on a private plane. And I thought, yeah, that's enough.
You've done your duty, right?
It was enough. When I tell you a private plane, we had to get a plane fly in to an airport that was closed down by the government. But he flew in there and we loaded up and he got us out to Kenya. For the first 15, 20 minutes in the air, I kept looking back, thinking, oh man, they're going to shoot us out of the sky. But after
Yeah.
about 20 minutes, I think my colleagues on the plane were looking at me like, it's South Sudan, Troy. They don't have this surface to air missiles, or you might want to calm down. But yeah, I was nervous for about the first 20 minutes till I felt we were safe and we landed. And it took me a day or two to shake that off.
I bet it did. I bet it did. Random question: have you by chance caught that movie by Gerard Butler called "The Machine Gun Preacher," who goes down to South Sudan or Sudan? I forget exactly the plot line. It's based on a true story, but I was curious if you had a
I
chance to
think
take a
you
look at that.
mentioned that to me before. Now I'm definitely gonna have to put this in my phone and get that movie because I don't think I've seen that.
I'd really be curious to get your perspective on that after you had a chance to watch it. I watched it with my wife, and it was pretty fascinating. So
I'm definitely going to.
I've had a little bit of a man crush on Gerard Butler, so I'm not embarrassed to say that. But yeah, so that's a really interesting movie. But Gerard, I mean, sorry, but Troy, you've been in these. I got a
Now
crush on
who
Troy Body.
now who else? Gerard's on here? Hey, buddy.
So, you've also been into some interesting situations stateside, right? Weren't you heavily involved in Hurricane Katrina or the aftermath of that?
There was a group formed by, and God bless him, he just recently passed away, Dr. Blakely, Ed Blakely. He passed away on the 8th, living in Sydney, Australia, came back. He's an American, um, was a disaster recovery expert, professor at Berkeley in planning and urban development. And he put together a team. While we worked for the city, we were really paid by the feds.
Right.
And we were part of the recovery development organization to help really pull down the plans from the feds and the states and get the money in place to help the recovery and building of New Orleans after the storm. That's probably one of the toughest jobs I ever had. And you're dealing with a city that has just been rocked by one of the worst disasters on record. And I tell you something about the staff, and it took me a while to learn that because when I get into a project or something, I can become a little too singularly focused on getting it done and getting it done correctly, and I'm very direct with it. I had to step back and learn that our staff, not only were they working around the clock to rebuild their city, when they got off work, they had to go rebuild their homes and rebuild their parents' home and rebuild their churches and go back to these neighborhoods and so forth that had been devastated.
Hmm.
And I tell you, hats off, hats absolutely off. And it was down in New Orleans that I learned my absolute love. Talk about love affair. You and Gerard Butler are nothing compared to me and code enforcement. That's I tell you this, and I'll swear it on my mother's Bible. Code enforcement rebuilt New Orleans, and I now know the value in every community that code enforcement and public works they need to be on the same level with police and fire.
Yeah, that doesn't always happen, right?
No,
In most communities, it seems like obviously police are up here and everybody else is down here, and especially the public works guys tend to be, I think, marginalized or disrespected in a lot of different organizations, unfortunately.
even in
And I don't mean by the city manager, by the way. I think just in terms of how the governing body sets their priorities with funding and budgeting and all that other stuff.
oh, in the communities, and you see them everywhere, the public will bring food and snacks and cakes and things to fire and police,
Right.
and that's awesome. And we always thank the public when they do it, but we've been always encouraging them to go, hey, stop by Public Works too. So one of the things the mayor and I do here, we'll send breakfast about every 2 or 3 months over to our public works team and go and join them for breakfast to thank them
Yeah.
because they're often not as visible. They're not in uniforms, they don't have big red trucks and things like that, but they're out there in the morning, especially ours, when they know the storms are coming.
Yeah. That inclement
uh,
weather.
and even events like as I'm speaking to you right now outside, they're setting up for Summer Salute, which is an end of summer music festival we have here in town on Friday night and Saturday night. And they've been working since probably 5 this morning. And what people don't see is when the events end at 11 o'clock at night,
They get to
our
go
team,
home, but the staff doesn't.
yeah, they're cleaning up the city, breaking down the stage and the equipment, and they're working until it's done. And they don't get the love and the praise they deserve. So I'm a big fan of code enforcement and public works, as well as
Awesome.
police and fire.
Awesome.
But working in New Orleans after I was on a grant. After that grant, that's how I ended up in Africa, initially with the International Republican Institute, and they liked my background and wanted me to work with political parties. And they said, would I be willing to go to Africa? And I said, of course. Would I go to Sudan because the country was going to break into two, South Sudan and than the Sudan, which is the northern part. And this is a very distinct line here. You have Arab Muslims in what is called Sudan now, and Black Christians is what in the new nation, the newest nation in the world, South Sudan.
Mhm.
And I was offered either to go there or to go to Somaliland. Honestly, I thought Sudan would be more interesting, and we had a little more movement. In Somaliland's, they're on a camp like I was in South Sudan, but we could leave camp at times and go and mingle and so forth. So I chose the Sudan, and I no regret. Sudan was, for some reason, we were told, high on George W. Bush's list. He had the way my big bosses told me in DC was those folks at the State Department and USAID were laying out their international plan with W and just basically said, here's the plan. There's nothing we can do for Sudan and some of these other countries. And Bush hit the table going, why? Why? He really, I think it was the faith of those Black Christians in what would
Mhm.
become South Sudan that he didn't want to abandon them. So we ended up with quite the largest grant. Israel is America's largest foreign aid donee, but then we received an extremely large. We got the largest grant from USAID to go work in South Sudan and help them set up a government. And the president at that time, W, sent the new president of South Sudan a black cowboy hat. Salva Kiir, Kiir. If you Google him, every time you see that man, he's in that hat. And I think that poor hat, that hat is hanging on for dear life. I don't know if he's got more than one for W, but my part was helping them set up registered political parties and to have opposition parties to the government. And we were invited in by the government, but we were to set up opposition parties to train the ruling party and to help set up opposition parties. It was up and down. It was a love affair and a hate affair. There were days when they signed off on everything we were doing. And then there are a couple of times I got sent for by national security. Um, they told me to come over to their building and they were going to send a car, but we went, I had to go.
You mean
And
to
we were,
evacuate you or
uh, I think to intimidate me, to lecture
okay.
me. We would let the embassy know. We'd let our bosses in DC know. And we went in our own car with my own little security guards that had no power. But I got lectured and what are you doing? And I said, I'm in this country with a visa, with a work visa. You know I'm here. You know where I am. You've got my phone number. You sent for me. And I had to do that a few times. And a lot of my South Sudanese colleagues would be a little more intimidated, but others said they would call us blue passports. You've got that blue passport. You're an American. They're not going to bother you. But they definitely threatened us and tried to intimidate us. But we had a job to do.
Well, man, wow, you just said a lot there, and I'm gonna do a little detour here because I guess I gotta bring the audience into the loop on this. So I reached out to Troy many months ago, and I've been a big fan of his for a long time. He's been one of my earliest followers on LinkedIn, and I've been a big fan of his content. And I just enjoy reading his perspective and the style and manner in which he communicates. And I don't always necessarily agree, and I think there's be a lot of things that we do disagree on. But I just find his takes so refreshing and so different than what you normally see in the local government sphere that I hit him up and I said, "Hey, I really would like to get you on the podcast and see if you have a desire to either one do a reoccurring interview series under the label the Black City Manager because he had started the Black City Manager page, or if you'd want to come on the podcast and then use it as a springboard to launch his own standalone podcast." And so, Troy, um, that's why I wanted to have you on here is like I really enjoy reading what you write and I really want to flesh out some of these ideas and perspectives that you have because I don't think there's really any other way long form content to do it and I don't think there's really anybody else out there who's going to be as willing and able to be as open and direct and honest with their style of communication than you are because you communicate things on your social media channels that I don't think a lot of people would ever want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Is that fair to say?
And I'm wondering why is that? But it probably is fair to say. And I don't, and it's so odd because I don't see it as really controversial. I just see it as direct and honest.
Well, if I'm going to be honest with you, I think anytime racial relations or issues get brought up in this country, it's a very touchy and difficult subject for people to navigate. And so I think that whole arena in of itself is something that really needs to be discussed. But people are so afraid of their own shadow when it comes to that subject matter and not being able to speak freely because one, they might be worried about being taken out of context or misunderstood or attacked or labeled or what have you. And so what I'm really excited about this potential venture between us is that you and I, we know each other. We've had many conversations through text, on the phone. We've met in person. Is that even if you and I might have differences of opinion on issues, we can come at it from a manner that is built on respect and appreciation for each other, and have an honest, sincere discussion without trying to attack or belittle or what's the word, marginalize another person's perspective. And so what I'm hoping is that regardless of what I think and believe, I'm looking at trying to platform what your opinions and your viewpoints and your perspectives are so that there's a mechanism in place for you to communicate the things that I think need to be communicated, whether I agree with them or not. I just think we need to have discussions, and I think you and I were going to agree actually on a lot of things too. So I don't want to make it sound like this is a crossfire type situation. You know what I mean. But that's why I really wanted to have you on the podcast. I've seen what you've been doing with the Black City Manager page on LinkedIn now for about a year, and I just think you're a unique person, and I want to share you. If that sounds kind of arrogant to say, I want to share you with the rest of the profession, and I think I have a platform to help do that, and that's why I really wanted to reach out and bring you on to the podcast and see where this thing goes. This is going to be a very organic. We have no preset plan in place. We're just sort of going to go by the seat of our pants and see how this thing takes off, if it takes off, and if you still have interest in doing it. So I'd be curious to get your take on why you decided to go down this path with me and explore it.
First of all, I appreciate the opportunity, and you have grown a large audience, and I'm more than willing to talk about it. And I'm going to go back to something you said in terms of when I said I don't understand why people are afraid to discuss it. You mentioned the word racial. I think, and I've said this to my city managers in the Western Kentucky group we have the Kentucky city managers and we have the Western Kentucky city managers, that you can discuss race without discussing racism. And that was one of the things when I started created that page, Black City Managers. It was not an advocacy page. And we're not victims. It is particularly focused on the Black City Managers building that excellence and meritocracy and doing the best job we can and leaning on one another, but focusing particularly on our cities first, and then in those areas that we call inner cities or urban areas, um, going at it with a fresh approach that we've got work to do in those areas, and let's do them non-emotionally. And if you've read the page, you've seen me read several times that I've said we're not social workers. We're not advocates in that page. You leave that to the Urban League and NAACP and those various people. You're the city manager, and you're going to approach those neighborhoods with the same demands and the same standards and so forth that you approach every neighborhood in your community. You're the city manager for every single resident. And we need to step back and go in and approach it that way because, in my opinion, what we've been doing across the country isn't working. It's just not working. And I'll take that all the way back up to HUD. If President Trump, or be it President Biden or Obama or W, any of them were sitting here, I tell them HUD does not work for me. Housing and urban development focuses a lot on housing, particularly low income housing. The UD of HUD, the urban development, we don't do anything in this country, in my opinion, for cities. We don't have a city czar. And CDBG grants, which I've written 1,000 times about, that ain't cutting it. We need a focus on American cities. And then for the Black city managers, I'm focusing on those urban areas where we go, that's just not cutting it either. We've got to do better. We've got to be, quite frankly, more demanding. And
Yeah.
with the residents in those neighborhoods, they got to meet us halfway. And whatever initiatives you come up with, they've got to meet you halfway. And whatever halfway means, in some neighborhoods, that may be 50-50. In some neighborhoods, that means you can only do 10%, we do 90%, but you got to have skin in the game. Otherwise, and I'm terribly comfortable saying this, You failed before you started, and it's a gimmick, and you're wasting taxpayer dollars and taxpayer time.
That's what I love about when you talk and when you write is you're not afraid to call people out, not with any sort of malice, but you hold people accountable. And I think what I really enjoy about reading your posts is that you are very open in saying, "Hey, city managers are not rainmakers. We're not messiahs who can come in and save a city, right? That the community itself has to also step up to the plate and take ownership for the issues that are being encountered not only in their neighborhood, but citywide."
You've done this job. There is no file folders in a cabinet in your office where you pull it out and go, in these folders, we can save this city, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to close that door and we're going to do a bunch of other stuff. No, if any city manager, be they white, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. If they had the answer, they'd give it to you. And what it is, it's I'll tell you something, Joe. When I was commissioner of culture and history in the state of West Virginia, there was a senator there. I think his last name, a state senator named Wagner. And West Virginia has 55 counties, and it's a very mountain state. It's all counties are in the Appalachian Regional Commission. And one of the things he sat down and talked to me about was what separates one county from the other, because they're all land, they're all covered with trees, they
Mhm.
all pretty much have the same thing, and it was leadership. Leadership. And when I came back to Kentucky after leaving West Virginia, I was a press secretary for Governor Fletcher, and I was also his executive director of minority affairs. We would fly to county after county after county. And I can tell you, Kentucky, we have 120 counties. You land in some counties and they'd meet the plane, maybe the county judge executive or someone, take us to a diner, introduce the governor to a few people. You had to eat something at the diner, for that photo op.
Mhm.
The governor take a few pictures, say a few words. They won't, hand them a Kentucky Colonel. This little document we give out, and it was really a big photo op. And that's that. Then you'd land in some other cities, other counties, and they'd meet us, shake hands, take us somewhere and sit us down, and they'd open up and they've got these plans. This is what we're working on. This is what we're doing. This is what we want to achieve. We've already talked to U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell, but this is what we expect from the feds. We got our end covered. This is what we expect from you, Governor. This is why you're here. It
Mhm.
wasn't a love in. These people met us. They had plans and expectations of us. And you could see the leadership in that county with laid out paper. And this is what you're going to take with you. And this is what we expect when we see you again.
Right.
And you could see the difference in leadership from county to county to county. And it's all leadership. And what I wanted to say to the Black city managers is that's what it is. It's leadership. Okay. You're in the job. Here we are. Now let's get to work. And for those areas of the community that need more work, okay, we're going to address it, but we're going to address it with no emotion. And we're not, again, social workers. We're going to go in here and using meritocracy and making demands and working with the community and meeting them halfway. We're going to be the best that we can absolutely be. We are all quality of life officers. Every every city manager in Kentucky and across the United States is a quality of life officer.
What do you mean by that when you say we're all quality of life officers? 'Cause I know you put that on your LinkedIn profile. You're very proud and you're very strong and firm in that belief. What does that mean to you? What does that mean? How should we all interpret that?
I think my purpose here is to maintain and raise the quality of life of every resident in this town. First, starting with public safety and protection of people and their property, and be it something as organic and germane as a park. If that person wants to go walking or live their life in this summer salute festival we're having tonight downtown, or working with our libraries, helping bring through economic development, not just company and businesses. I see economic development is making sure our hospitals and medical care is taken care of, and doing whatever we can to lure doctors and nurses that to give us that best medical standard for you to live the highest quality of life you can in this community. And we meet those most basic needs, and you can take it from there and run and be whoever, whatever you aspire to be. We are quality of life officers, and that's how I see our role. We are not saviors. We don't heal, but we're maintaining and giving the best quality of life in a community, so you and your family can be the best you decide is right for you. Government should be dull. Government should be in the background. I don't want you to wake up and think about that road, and that the bus is coming to pick your kids up in the morning, or you're driving to work, or maybe that factory where you work, we help bring incentives to bring it in. You don't have to think about that. You pay me every 2 weeks. And we work with the school system, and we patrol at night when you're sleeping, and we work with dispatch. We're there if you need us. We're in the background doing the work you paid us to do, and to provide you with the quality of life. If you need us, we're there. And your thank you is my paycheck every 2 weeks.
You know, man, this is such an organic. We don't have a script. We didn't even plan out what we're gonna say, right? We're just doing by the seat of our pants. And so I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna ask you because I figure why not? Like, why beat around the bush, right? This is exactly where I wanted the conversation to go sequentially. But since you brought up policing, I'm kind of curious. This is the Black City Manager episode of the podcast, right? What are your thoughts on the whole defund the police and the things that came out of George Floyd and the perception of law enforcement in Black communities and what have you? Like, what's your take? And obviously, it's a very wide ranging topic because I'm not sure exactly what you feel comfortable navigating through or not. But I'm kind of curious to get your take on that, Troy.
Nobody's gonna defund police while I'm working in that city. That is, the sole I mean, first and foremost, public safety is our goal, and having worked, let me go to my days of working in Africa and working in Asia. When you are in those villages and so forth, and pick a country in Africa, because Nigeria is a country that's very wealthy and loaded with oil, but a lot of those villages are struggling. And South Africa, stunningly beautiful and very developed in some areas. Where you see non-development is instability. And when I say instability, when you've got constant conflict, be it tribal, political, what have you, then nothing grows. Nothing grows, be it a church community, be it academia. In South Sudan, I saw those young guys and gals start up in their little colleges, and then tribal warfare would break out. And 3 months into their study, they had to stop, and
Hmm.
they don't know when they're going to get back into class, maybe 8, 9 months, and then it stops again and back and forth. And those that were fortunate enough to get into America and Canada and Europe and various other places, upon graduation, you have to look at their resume with an understanding that you go, okay, you're this age, it took you 7 or 8 years to get this 4-year degree. Well, understand where they came from. The war
Hmm.
broke up their education process. So when you have instability, nothing grows. And I'm trying to be very serious when I say here, just take a plant, a house plant in your home, and take two forks and just stick it in both ends of the soil and just constantly stir it up like you're tossing a salad, and see how well that plant grows. It's not. You're disturbing its base. You're disturbing its soil. You're giving it too much instability, and nothing will grow. And that is the same in a community. First and foremost, the city manager needs to provide stability, and the police are major in that role of providing
Hmm.
stability. And we're doing it when you don't even know we're doing it. We're patrolling in front of your house while you're asleep. And I was just texting with the police chief before I came down here to the podcast room to do this interview with you. We have a 55,000 square foot sportsplex, and one of the things that's very popular is called the Junior Pro Basketball Leagues, and it's starting up here in the fall. And I was telling the chief, I sent him an email, make sure there's a police officer just walking through.
Hmm.
I want them to walk through every single game, because it ain't the kids, it's the parents that are lately in these little sports here, little league level sports, that are just starting to lose it, and they
Yeah.
get too hyped up and they're ready to fight. And it's the stability the officer in his uniform can provide just by walking through the game. And I was sending the chief an email that we'll send you the schedule, and I want an officer at every game. We're providing that stability, sometimes visibly, sometimes not visibly. In terms of defunding the police, you won't do that ever on my watch. I
Yeah.
fought very hard for their budgets. I know the role they play, and that we play with each other. Let me tell you, because you and I talked earlier about code enforcement. There are times when my code enforcement officers have to call a police officer to go with them, to post a notice of violation in a yard, or to enter into a structure. We need the police there with us. They work in harmony with fire, with public works, with code enforcement. So absolutely, I'm 100% on the team of my police officer. Is every officer a perfect officer? Absolutely not. By all means, we've had to let a few officers go. And just like a city manager is not always perfect. But in terms of their importance in the community, honestly, Joe, I don't even know. I'd have to do the origins of where did that even start shouting from defund the police. It's
It's one of the dumbest things ever, right?
I it's
I mean,
abs-
it, it's just one of the dumbest things ever. I just, and it's funny whenever the people who are like the loudest ones who talk about it, they're the ones that are walking around with their private security or their own sort of police force guarding them or protecting them. So I don't know. It's just highly amusing. But you talk about stability, Troy, and that's kind of gets back to sort of one of the core foundations or tenets of what I've been trying to do with my advocacy for city managers and what have you is this idea that these toxic city councils across the country that are seem to almost exploding out of like mushrooms is just becoming so prevalent with the toxicity and the volatility. The turnover in the city management ranks within an organization is not healthy. It's very expensive directly as far as financially as well as indirectly on all the other costs and the negatives that associated with that turnover. And we're seeing a rise, at least I think anecdotally. I don't have a Harvard study to prove this or anything like that, but it seems to me that instability at local government is increasing, and that seems to be most prevalently, I guess, identified with the turnover at the top with the city manager positions across the country. I mean, I do my news scan on a weekly basis, and this is anecdotal. Again, I don't have a study, but man, every week I'm seeing a manager or two who last less than a year in their community. And like, how is that healthy?
and and I would say it's not healthy. And I would say to prospective city managers, we just hired a young man as a policy coordinator for me, and he told me in an interview, long term, he wants to become a city manager, and he's going to join AAME. Uh,
Are you talking about Cody Brem?
yep,
Yep.
uh,
All right. Shout
uh,
out to Cody.
Cody, and he's very upfront about his role and what he wants to play, and where he wants to go. And his wife is a JAG attorney. So the reality of it is I would say to prospective city managers, know what you're walking into. This isn't a ceremonial position. There's actually where you're cutting ribbons and always out there shaking hands. It's sort of like those folks that if you like to cook and you see these celebrity chefs and they're shaking hands at the door of the restaurant. That's a tiny little bit of their job. Eh, Being a chef and running the restaurant is one of the hardest things out there. And the same is with being a city manager. You may see them out at an event and shaking hands and ribbon cutting, but the real work is inside. And it's hey, I've had officers shot, and it's a 24 hours, 7-day a week job, 365 days a year. It's like they have handed you a baby, and they want that baby back, healthier, stronger, bigger. At some point, and you just don't forget about it. It's a marriage when you take this position. And one thing, not only do you have to be smart and dedicated and committed, you got to be tough. I mean, you just do. You got to be tough. When you do your job right, and I'll go back to that, that's what you get that paycheck for every 2 weeks. Now, people are not going to come pat you on the back. They're not going to leave you a tip. That is your job. I mean, seriously, when nobody thanks the electric company every 5 minutes when you flip that switch and the lights come on. That's what you pay them for. But it comes on. Or when you flush that toilet and that waste goes out to the wastewater treatment plant, or your trash is picked up on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. I've lived in third world, or now we say developing nations. One of the things they don't have, and that makes them unstable, or as you call them, a developing nation, is that what boring bureaucratic systems and processes and procedures on a local level
The
that we
nuts and
have
bolts, right? The nuts and
that
bolts
we
of
take
government.
absolutely that you take for granted when you think about how much mail, even with usage of email and everything, how much mail is moved through the US Postal Service. And occasionally you're going to get something late or something's going to come up missing. But by and large, my God, their batting average
Solid. They
It's
get a
it's
bad
bad.
rap. They get an incredible bad rap. I mean, it's amazing what you can do. I mean, to send a letter across country in a couple of days for I don't even know what a stamp is nowadays. What is it, 70 cents? I don't know.
I've got a
It's pretty
few that are
incredible.
called forever stamps. I think I paid a certain price and they can't change the price on me. But what we do on a local level across this country, we're the very fabric, the sinews of holding this country together. I'll always sing the praises of city managers and local government because it is the toughest part of the job. And I say that really because I've worked in international affairs where a lot of American people paid us money to go do things and either they forget about us over there or they're not that interested. And even on state and federal level, where you're more detached, and I appreciate all the work they've done, but on the local level, we meet our bosses in the supermarket and in the movie theater every day.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, if that trash isn't picked up on Wednesday like it's supposed to be,
You're
we're
gonna hear
gonna
about
hear
it.
it.
Yep,
And
yep.
and if there's a pothole on Joe Turner Street, uh, we're gonna know about it. And so we have to meet needs and expectations every single day.
Troy, that's a point I wanna make, and you've hit on it, but I wanna touch on it in a different way. When you get to the city manager seat, prior to getting to the city manager seat, you can pretty much hide in a lot of respects in different levels of government, right? If you're a management analyst, you can kind of hide, no one sees you. Even at the department head level, you can hide quite a bit because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the city manager.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I would like to tell or communicate to the aspiring city managers, and I'm hoping we have a lot of aspiring Black city managers who are going to start listening to these interviews that we're doing because that's your audience, right? You're speaking obviously to existing Black city managers, but obviously the aspiring ones as well. Is that one of the most challenging things that you have to understand? And I've talked about this in the different context of being lonely at the top, but when you are a city manager, you don't get to hide. There's no
No.
hiding and running from any of these problems because every problem is eventually gonna bubble up to your desk if it gets to be big enough, and you can't run from it.
Oh, absolutely not. We had a department head meeting yesterday, and the mayor, we're building a new firehouse on the south side of town. And the projection point, we're going to open late October now, and it may be late November. And the mayor was asking the fire chief about it, but at some point I had to step in and go, that's on me. That's on me. Is it really on me? Did I really slow down construction? Not really, but I did tell the deputy fire chief that we have the point person of managing the construction, slow it down, do it right. We're going to do this building right, and we're not going to open it until it is 100% correct. And the buck will stop with me. And I said it in the meeting to the mayor. It's all on me. And you have to be there for your team. Now, I just before this interview, I just came back from the new firehouse with the deputy chief, and I did ask him, "What's going on here?" Well, you told me, you told me we're going to be open in October, and now I had to sit there in the meeting and tell the mayor now it's going to be November. And he said, "Well, there's construction and all that." I said, "It hasn't been raining. The weather is perfect, and so forth." But the truth remains, the buck does stop with me. And
Yes.
I want a boss that's gonna take that air. I'm gonna praise publicly and privately. We have some hard, conversations,
Yeah.
uh, but there are things that there are lives at stake. We made a promise to the community, borrowed money in the community's name, the council signed off on it. I'm answering to 32,000 people every day with their money, with their government in their name, and I have
Right.
to take that seriously.
100%. Absolutely.
And if the buck isn't gonna stop with you, don't get in this. Seriously, don't get in this. I've seen a few city managers that I don't know personally, but I can see how they're using their social media page. There was one in a southern state, and it was constantly promoting of him, never promoting his city, never promoting his departments, never promoting his council or his mayor and the work and the good works they're doing. It was used 100% to promote him, and I thought, is this for you?
Hmm, hmm. Troy, I want to segue as we work our way to the end of this first episode. And again, we don't have a roadmap here. We're just exploring this. And like I said, I want to give you a platform, and I'm really excited about where this is going to go, the potential. Can you speak more to what was in your heart and your thought process when you decided to launch the Black City Manager? What have you wanted to accomplish when you set out to do that? has your vision changed as you've been going down that road? And I'd also like you to maybe speak to what sort of messages or outreach or contacts have you received from one, either other current Black city managers or those who are aspiring to become city managers? If you wouldn't mind just sort of riffing on that for a little while.
There is a LinkedIn page, thank you for mentioning it, called the Black City Managers. And interestingly enough, I knew it would be a small segment because, like, I'm the only Black city manager in Kentucky. There's a guy, I don't think he's there anymore. He was there for a little while, the only Black city manager in Nebraska. So I knew that probably,
He's not there
probably,
anymore.
no,
Cameron Gales in Valley.
damn, yeah,
He went somewhere else. I think he's in Iowa now.
Iowa, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew that I was probably reaching out to city managers, deputy city managers, assistant or associate city managers, maybe at best, probably 200, 300 people. I knew that going in. This was going to be a small, cliquish boutique page. It has grown because I would say the majority of my audience isn't Black on
Right.
there, but and that's fine. They follow or connect, and that's great. Um, just go back to that person I was talking to you about in that southern state that's using his job and his platform to constantly promote himself. That was one of the triggers for it. Go that's no, you've got too much need in your community, and I think you're squandering that great opportunity and that privilege the community has given you. That particularly to address the city as a whole in the aggregate, but then those particular neighborhoods, what we call inner city neighborhoods or urban neighborhoods, how you address them and address them seriously and directly and be clear. And what worked in the 50s and the 40s, well, in the 50s and the 60s, and God love them, they did what they did, marches and protests and all that. That's not going to work anymore. But we do have this new technology and we do have more access and resources, and we're going to step back and reapproach it. So I wanted to target a particular audience of Black city managers in America and say, we're going to step up our game. This is based solely on meritocracy. We are not advocates. We're not going to be emotional about it. And we're going to do measurable differences in our community. And we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to be able to show crime is down, uh, housing stock quality is up, and the quality of life in these neighborhoods are markedly and measurably improved.
Yeah.
And by whatever that means, it's going to be a little different in Memphis than it is in Maine, but so be it. And we're going to take
Right.
it seriously. And we're going to shift our focus and our practice on how we do it. We are not the Urban League. We're not the NAACP. We are the city manager for every resident in that town. But we're going to raise the standard of life and we're going to raise our demands. In some areas, you have to be more demanding. And that can mean different things in different communities. And I gave a speech to Hopkinsville leadership class. Every community has some sort of leadership class. And I gave a speech where in the council chambers where I said, pick up the damn Coke can. And there was another elected official who said, well, you're kind of philosophizing. And I said, no, the can is a metaphor. What I mean by pick up the can is the city picks up the trash that's in a can.
Right.
We don't go around and pick up the can, but you've got to meet us halfway. You've got to pick up the can in your neighborhood. You've got to take care of your property. You've got to go to the schools and work with the principal and the teachers when it's your kids. It's not their job to raise your children. You've got to help us. You've got to meet me halfway, or we've lost before we began. Pick up the can is a metaphor because I will say it. I've said it on the Black City Managers. I said it to those young people in leadership Hopkinsville, and I say it to you and your audience. There is no way for me to love your neighborhood, your home, and your family more than you.
Amen.
And there
Amen.
is no way for a city manager or any government official to do so. So we got to start from that premise. I am here and you are paying me to help you, but you've got to meet me halfway, whatever that means to that particular neighborhood. Again, that may be 10% on their part, 90% on ours, or it may be 50-50. But you've got to have some skin in the game or we've lost before we started.
One of the things I like about the Black City Managers page on LinkedIn is that um, even though you are thematically themed, right, or directing your content at Black city managers or prospective city
Mhm,
managers, right?
mhm.
Um, much of your content is universal, which I think is like the greatest thing in the world because at the end of the day, there shouldn't be much of a difference in the teachings and the lessons of being an effective, talented executive, whether you're white, black, or whatever. Obviously, there's nuances and there's the margins of things that are different experiences, life experiences. Community has its own culture, vibe, pulse, personality. I get all that, but that's one thing that I've really enjoyed about your content, Troy, is that it's universally applicable. And I'm kind of curious, like, when I started, it was interesting, and I've shared this. I don't know if I shared this on the podcast or I've just shared this in personal conversations. When I started my LinkedIn journey and I started getting traction, and I was, going out there, putting myself out there, really setting a trend, right? Or being a groundbreaker, or whatever you want to, how you want to identify it. Much of the interaction I would get from individuals who were looking for advice or feedback was from women and minorities, particularly minority men, right?
Mm.
And I felt really honored and proud of that. The fact that, they were like looking to me for some feedback on certain situations. I don't want to name anybody personally right now on the page, but it's been, I've really enjoyed that outreach and then be able to help others. But I'm kind of curious, what kind of interactions have you had with people hitting you up on a personal level, whether it's through your emails or through text or through the site platform? What have you experienced in terms of that dynamic, and how has that impacted you?
It is interesting because, and again, let's go back to what you started doing. You filled a void when we met, and I put out there online what's ICMA for, and I am thankful that ICMA has new leadership, and I wish her well, and I hope they can do for city managers across America what they promised to do. I wasn't getting what I needed from ICMA, and I threw it out there, and that, like, what are they for? And nobody really ever answered that question. Um, but I started with Black City Managers. I You're right, it is universal. Look, at the end of the day, man, I we do police patrol, we pick up trash, we pave roads. I don't know how Republicans and Democrats do that differently. I don't know how a white, black, Asian, Jewish, or Hispanic city managers do that differently, or male or female. And my whole thing was, particularly with black city managers, is you're not different. That's the whole point. So don't go in there, I'm gonna approach this from a black city manager point of view. No, because at the end of the day, people like strong leadership. And the black community may champion you. Oh, hey, we got our first black city manager. But I tell you, that goes out the door when that Wednesday trash picked up pickup isn't done. They
Right.
don't care that you're a black city manager. They know is there, hey, you, that garbage can's still out there. And do your job, and let's get focused on the meritocracy. Okay. You may be the first black city manager in your community. That's going to be talked about. You're going to be in the newspaper. Now we have a job to do. And that's what my page is about. We have a job to do, and we're going to focus on excellence. No excuses. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to tolerate it. And I'm being very direct here. I don't need a history lesson. I don't want a history lesson of what went on in your community 75 years ago, 100 years ago. When I talk about paved streets or police patrol and training your staff and picking up the trash and the highest quality of life, we must look forward. I want a city of today looking forward. And that is the job you signed up for. And if you're not going to do it, get out of this profession.
Hmm.
And that's what we're here for. And you said it has resonated. It is. I would say I probably have more non-black people signed up on that page than I do black, but my focus is telling the black city managers, eyes on the prize, stay focused. And it's all about meritocracy. Now, it's been a year, started September a year ago. I do want to amplify it into talking about training, not just lecturing them, talking about AI, talking about communicating more with one another. And maybe you can help me do that. And maybe that's what you're going for and telling me to look in the podcasting. In terms of the engagements, I do get DMs and so forth on LinkedIn. One of the biggest things is I think people think I'm a group. They'll ask me about who all this. Well, yeah, they'll ask me who this team is, who my staff is, where this organization's located. And I've several times I always do this. I text back and go, no, it's just me. And I get the same response back, no matter where it's coming from. Well, who is me? And then I just say, I'm Troy Body. I'm actually friends with you on my other page. And then they'll go check that out and go, oh, okay, nice to meet you. I had one guy write and say, where is the well of all of these thoughts coming from? And I thought, you don't want me to say where I'm pulling them from, but I think about them before I write them. It
Mhm.
may be something I'm reading, maybe something that is an issue of the day. And sometimes, Joe, like right now, I'll write the post and you can time it. I've got them timed
Yep.
out to probably this Sunday. And I may go in and change that and put something out if I see something more important that I think popped up. Some of them are you put, as you know this. You put a post out there and it falls flat as a raw egg, and then you
Mhm.
put something out there that you don't think is that big a deal, and it'll take off and run. And you go,
100%.
what? Well,
100%.
I wrote to black city managers about grammar is important. And I think that's probably been the most important, the one I've got that went most viral. But undergraduate, I was a journalism major, and I learned that good writing, it deems trust. If you see something and there's grammatical mistakes on it, you lose trust in it and the writer.
Mhm.
And so it's one thing, take your writing seriously. Think before you hit. Texting and being in the comment section on social media is one thing, but when you're sending something out in your
Official.
name, which,
Yeah.
yeah, with your city seal, take it seriously because if I see typos in it, I lose trust in your credibility. And that resonated and it got shared a lot and got a lot of hits. I got one text from one city manager. She said, I wish I could say the things you say. And I thought, you can. What I was saying is we went through,
But they
yeah,
can't. But Troy, I got dozens of those too over when I was starting my journey. It's like, yes, I agree with you, right? Because it's like, yes, you can. There's nothing stopping you, but then people are held back because they're fearful of the consequence of speaking out and and being candid.
but then how are you going to be effective in your job? And that came about was we have a predominantly black side of town here in Hopkinsville on the east side, and we do neighborhood association meetings regularly. Our community development services agency has a group of staff that's what they do. And the lady named Christy that runs that neighborhood association, I adore her. She's highly intelligent, very articulate. She runs that neighborhood association with an iron fist. She had the police chief over, she had me over, and so forth, and some staff, the mayor. And there was an elderly black lady that said, I'm here to speak on behalf of my friend. She's an elderly lady and she's concerned about coming. She's nervous. She's afraid to come. She asked me to come. That there was some young black, I don't want to say teenagers, maybe young men, out in front of her house at 3 in the morning and they're blasting the music from their truck so loudly that her hutch that holds her china is rattling.
Wow.
And she's afraid to come out and speak. And so this lady came to the neighborhood association and spoke on her behalf, and I interrupted the chief, and I said, "This is my whole point. This is the quality of life, Joe, that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna have residents afraid in their house." And I had a younger parent in there talking to the police about, "Can you intervene? Can you talk to the kids? Why are you pulling up on them? They feel like they're being profiled. Can you do this?" And I interrupted the chief and said, "We're not social workers. We're law enforcement. And instead of asking, why are we pulling up asking these young men questions at 3 in the morning, why are your
Where the
children
parents
out on
at? Yeah, where
why
the
are your
parents right.
children out on
Yeah.
the street at 3 a.m.? And I've got an elderly black lady here whose dishes are rattling and she's afraid to come and she sent her friend. And I told her friend, I can assure you her dishes will rattle no more. And I will pull up wherever I feel the need to. And this is what we're going to be talking. Now, I asked the lady that asked the question, if somebody comes to your house tonight at 3 a.m. and crawling through your window, do you want us to come and arrest them and drag them to the jail, or do you want us to intervene and hold their hand and talk to them? Let's get serious here. We're
Right.
law enforcement. We're not social workers. Now, we do all the community engagement you can possibly think of. Soda with a cop, basketball games, barbecue, you name it. And there is a role for that. And I'm a big champion of that. But when the rubber hits the roads, we are law enforcement, and particularly in the black community, we're there more than anywhere else, quite frankly. And we're going to take our job very seriously. To the person that DM'd me asking, I wish I could say that. I thought, why can't you? Why can't you ask in the black community of your city, hey, what's going on? Why are your children out in the street at 3 a.m.? Nothing good's going on. Why? And what kind of job are you in that you can't ask that question?
Mhm.
And I did write her back and say, you can. But I thanked her for reaching out to me, and I'm going to be candid in this job. Otherwise, I'm ineffective. I
Right.
don't mean to be crude. Joe, there's a difference from being direct and being blunt. And being
Mm.
blunt can be a little rude, but being direct, if you're using the facts and you're being respectful, sometimes you just simply have to be direct. Your children don't need to be out on the streets at 3 a.m. And the cops, particularly when they're in front of some private residence and they're disturbing that resident, have every right to ask what's going on here, fellas.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, Troy, that's one of the reasons why I'm really glad to have you on and we're going to explore this series is I just think you have so much different life experience and perspectives working over in Africa when you're doing those different programs and building the countries and the systems of government. And I'm really excited to explore where this is going to go. And I'm really hoping people enjoy it. So we'll wrap this up for the first episode. And I'm hoping if the folks enjoy the content, they'll let me know. They'll give us some feedback. Please tell us what you think about this because I'm really excited about where this could go, Troy. Do you have any final words before we wrap up this first episode?
I can tell you, I appreciate you reaching out and letting Black City Managers have a platform. And on behalf of me and all the Black City Managers and Gerard Butler, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Troy. I'm Joe Turner. This is the City Manager Unfiltered podcast, a podcast for city managers and other public sector executives. If you enjoyed the content, like I said a minute ago, please hit that follow, subscribe button on your platform of choice. Please leave a rating and review on your platform of choice. And don't be afraid to reach out to me or Troy and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see or what kind of issue you'd like to see us discuss in a future episode. All right? Catch you next week.